this great inheritance and of the duties and heavy responsibilities of sovereignty, which have now passed to my beloved daughter.
The answer didn't come wrapped in sympathy.
The answer didn't come wrapped in sympathy. It didn't arrive with fatherly softness or brotherly hesitation. It came cold, direct, final, request denied. And just like that, on the morning of January 20th, 2026, the last royal lifeline snapped in midair, leaving Prince Harry suspended over a financial cliff with no net below. At exactly 9:15 a.m., under the authority delegated on January 1st, Prince William made the call that would echo through Montecito like a thunderclap. The duchy would not release a single dollar, not $400,000 for emergency insurance, not $2 million to plug legal leaks, not $7 million to cushion a Netflix fallout, not $30 million to repackage assets into protective trusts. $36 million rejected in under 20 minutes. And this was never just about money. It was about a message, a reckoning, a line drawn so sharply it cut through blood. The crisis had been building quietly, like wildfire smoke creeping over the Santa Barbara hills. On January 18th, the homeowner's insurance policy on the $14.6 million Montecito estate, Riven Rock, was terminated. Not political, not personal. Compliance. Updated wildfire risk assessments. In California's elite property corridors, insurance isn't optional. It's oxygen. Without it, mortgages suffocate. JP Morgan Chase didn't blink. Buried deep in the Sussex mortgage contract was a clause allowing foreclosure based solely on lapsed insurance. Payments could be current, reputation could be royal, none of it mattered. The lender issued a brutal ultimatum: secure forced placement emergency insurance with a $400,000 upfront premium within 48 hours or default triggers. 48 hours. $400,000. Harry didn't call a mortgage attorney. He didn't dial a restructuring specialist. He called Kensington Palace. Multiple insiders confirm he bypassed every formal channel and demanded personal review by Prince William. The request was sweeping: $400,000 to restore insurance. $1. $2 to $2 million for taxes, education, mounting legal fees, $7 million to offset Netflix liability exposure, and $30 million for long-term asset shielding through blind trust. Total ask, $36.3 million. William, read it once. No funds shall be released. The matter is closed. The message was delivered through Sir Alec Worthington, Senior Financial Integrity Officer of the Duchy. It wasn't emotional, it was procedural. Governance. Precedent. The crown would not bankroll reputational salvage. Stunned, Harry escalated. If the brother wouldn't bend, perhaps the father would. King Charles III received the appeal, but what returned from Sandringham at 8:40 a.m. was not comfort. It was closure. There will be no duchy funds, no grace and favor, no extensions, no further institutional correspondence regarding the Montecito property. I recommend liquidation at the earliest viable window. 5 lines, sealed, co-signed by Princess Anne after a 6-week financial audit. Liquidation. That word landed harder than foreclosure, because this collapse didn't begin with wildfire risk or Netflix penalties. It began weeks earlier on December 8th, 2025, when Prince William authorized a confidential audit into the Sussex financial structure. Princess Anne joined the review. Over 3 weeks, auditors traced patterns, unsustainable spending, blurred lines between charity and commerce, monetization of royal proximity. Then came the detail that reportedly shifted the mood from concern to fury. At their 2018 royal wedding, watched globally, Harry and Meghan pledged that $2.1 million in gifts and proceeds would go to the Diana Princess of Wales Memorial Fund, overseen by Princess Catherine. The audit revealed a significant portion had later been redirected to M&M Projects LLC, a Delaware entity tied to early early development of Meghan's canceled Netflix animated series Pearl. The Sussex team described it as a mission-aligned operational shift. Sir Alec reportedly described it differently, a misappropriation of trust in spirit, if not in law. When Charles reviewed the file on January 12th, insiders say he whispered just 3 words, so it was true. From that moment, the bailout was dead. But Hollywood hadn't pulled the plug yet. That unraveling began January 18th, the same day the insurance lapsed. Meghan appeared on an unsanctioned lifestyle podcast and made explosive claims about Tyler Perry, the man who once opened his Beverly Hills mansion to them, funded over $3 million in security, offered legal and logistical lifelines in 2020. On air, she suggested he had abandoned her during a crisis, that his role as godfather to Princess Lilibet had been leveraged improperly, that he benefited from royal proximity. Within 24 hours, Perry's legal team assembled documentation, financial logs, invoices, correspondence. And when Harry reportedly called Perry seeking a $400,000 bridge loan to delay foreclosure, the reply was icy. "I'm not the bank or the godfather anymore. You didn't default on money, you defaulted on gratitude." The call lasted under 3 minutes. Then Hollywood recalibrated. Internal risk memos circulated across WME, KA, and Netflix. Exposure assessments updated, legal teams convened. On January 17th, Netflix triggered a performance clause in the Sussex contract, reportedly worth $100 million originally. 5 major projects proposed, only 1 fully delivered. Pearl canceled mid-development, Heart of Invictus stalled, scripted drama shelved, children's content underperformed. The clawback notice, $20 million. This isn't creative tension, one executive summarized, it's contractual failure. Archewell began hemorrhaging. By mid-January, internal balance sheets showed less than $1.1 million in unrestricted cash. Grants frozen, Mayfair office closed, staff reduced to skeleton operations, administrative suspension. One former board member said it bluntly: "They didn't burn bridges. They set fire to the entire coastline. Inside Riven Rock, dismantling began before dawn." On January 16th, Harry and Meghan vacated the master wing and relocated to a guest suite behind the pool. Furniture loaded onto trucks, gym equipment disassembled, artwork removed, screening room stripped, archival boxes labeled for off-site storage. They weren't moving forward, one staffer said quietly. They were shrinking, staffing slashed. Private chef dismissed January 3rd. 2 full-time nannies reduced to 1 part-time caregiver. Security scaled back to a single patrol shift. Motion sensors deactivated. Landscaping reduced. Drone surveillance grounded. Lights dimmed earlier each night. The children, once enrolled at the $48,000 per year Kate School, were withdrawn January 8th. Quiet transfer to Laguna Blanca School. Tuition reduced by roughly $40,000 annually. Official explanation: emotional wellness. Faculty whisper: survival. By January 19th, the estate was a hollow echo of itself. A covert pocket listing was activated, no ML's trail, no photos, NDAs only. Outreach to Gulf investors, Silicon Valley billionaires, foreign dignitaries. Within 48 hours, 4 pre-vetted buyers withdrew. Litigation exposure, insurance instability, reputational risk. One investor reportedly described it in 6 words: a liability wrapped in landscaped perfection. At 7 a.m. on January 20th, a courier arrived at 765 Rockbridge Road. Royal insignia on the envelope. 5 lines. Final. No Dutchy funds, no grace and favor, no correspondence. Liquidate. That same day, Harry lost his court argument on the mortgage default clause. The foreclosure clock ticked louder. And back in Britain, discussions quietly reactivated about peerage review. Whether the titles Duke and Duchess of Sussex were being commercially leveraged in violation of 2024 ethics guidance. A confidential House of Lords memo described inherited privilege being weaponized against national image. At Windsor Castle, Prince William was asked whether he had spoken to his brother. "We have moved forward, no anger, no elaboration, moved forward." Meanwhile, Princess Anne delivered a pointed speech in Geneva about institutions being defined not by applause but by principle. Princess Catherine declined a joint mental health initiative outreach, reportedly responding, "Promises were made and not kept." By January 22nd, Archewell's final accounts were submitted submitted for internal audit. Hollywood silent. Palace silent. Riven Rock unsold. On the balcony overlooking rain-soaked stone, one man stood alone, once positioned to redefine modern royalty, now facing liquidation notices and closed gates. This wasn't a screaming feud. It was a slow structural severance. The Sovereign Grant Transparency Protocol, enacted in 2024, hardened financial firewalls, no private mortgage rescues, no personal litigation subsidies, no security for non-working royal, no exceptions. Charles reportedly told advisors, "That is not cruelty. That is clarity, and clarity when it arrives this late feels indistinguishable from exile." By the morning of January 21st, the silence from Buckingham Palace had become louder than any statement ever could. No rebuttals, no briefings, no sympathetic leaks to soften the optics. Just an institutional stillness that made one thing brutally clear: this was not a temporary freeze. It was a permanent reset. Inside Parliament, conversations once whispered behind velvet curtains began moving into formal channels. The peerage review, previously considered too politically sensitive to touch, was quietly reactivated. Senior MPs, guided by Cabinet Office recommendations, began assessing whether the titles Duke and Duchess of Sussex were being commercially leveraged in breach of updated 2024 ethics guidance. A confidential memo circulated through the House of Lords described the situation in stark terms: inherited privilege must not be weaponized against the national image. This wasn't gossip anymore. It was constitutional territory. Back in Montecito, Riven Rock felt less like a home and more like a stage set waiting to be dismantled. The main residence sat pristine but hollow, staged for discreet viewings that rarely materialized. The guest house lights glowed faintly each evening behind drawn curtains. The once busy driveway remained empty, no convoys, no rotating security SUVs, no production vans, just stillness. One neighbor, watching from a ridge above, described seeing Harry alone on the balcony the night of January 21st. No phone in hand. No pacing, no visible staff nearby, just standing, motionless, staring into the dark hills. "It looked like someone waiting for something that wasn't coming," she said quietly. Inside, the unraveling had become methodical. Remaining household staff worked limited hours. Personal assistants transitioned to remote-only schedules. Legal advisors rotated in and out without fanfare. Boxes continued to leave the property in unmarked trucks, archival documents, framed photographs, memorabilia from royal tours, storage containers labeled for off-site facilities in Los Alamos. The children's wing, once brightly lit and busy with tutors and caretakers, was consolidated into 2 rooms near the guest suite. The larger bedrooms were closed off, climate control reduced, utility usage scaled back. It wasn't dramatic, it was incremental. A slow contraction of space. And while Montecito shrank physically, London tightened procedurally. Under the Sovereign Grant Transparency Protocol, enacted in July 2024, the monarchy had hardened its financial firewall. No crown funds for private mortgages, no legal fee subsidies tied to personal litigation, no security budgets for individuals removed from active royal service. Any deviation required parliamentary approval. None was sought, none was offered. Prince William's doctrine had crystallized into something more than policy. The duchy is not a safety net for bad decisions. That phrase, attributed to him in January 2026, began circulating privately within palace corridors. To him, this was never about revenge. It was about precedent. If a bailout were granted, even quietly, it would signal that separation carried no consequence, that monetizing royal identity while rejecting royal discipline came without cost. So the line held. King Charles, for his part, remained outwardly restrained. Internally, however, aides described the mood as resolute. The memory of 2021, when Prince Andrew's civil case forced painful institutional recalibration, still lingered. Then, the palace refused to fund the $12 million settlement. Andrew paid from private resources, titles were stripped, duties revoked, residents downgraded. No safety nets. Sarah Ferguson had faced similar asset rationalization orders in 2023, 2024 after prolonged financial instability. Vacate Royal Lodge by December. No extensions. The pattern was consistent. The firewall was real. This is not punishment, one senior Privy Council advisor reportedly said. It's governance. Meanwhile, the entertainment industry continued its quiet distancing. WME formally pulled Meghan's proposed documentary series, Motherhood and Reinvention, citing unresolved legal exposure and reputational risk. No rebrand, no reschedule, just removal. Netflix, having already issued the $20 million clawback notice on January 17th, ceased all forward development conversations. Internal creative teams were reassigned, production calendars wiped clean. Hollywood didn't announce exits, it simply moved on. Archwell, once positioned as a philanthropic and media hybrid powerhouse, entered what legal filings described as administrative hibernation, a technical holding pattern often used before dissolution. The Mayfair UK office was permanently shuttered. US operations reduced to skeletal compliance oversight. No new grants issued, no public programming scheduled beyond March 2026. Unrestricted reserves hovering below $1.1 million, insufficient for long-term sustainability. Donors stopped calling. Invitations stopped arriving. Holiday cards, once exchanged with prominent political and media figures, reportedly returned unanswered. The social contraction mirrored the financial one. In Geneva on January 21st, Princess Anne delivered remarks at the International Trust and Governance Forum. She never mentioned names, but the subtext was unmistakable. Institutions endure not because they are loved, she said, but because they are consistent. Observers in the room noted the pointed emphasis on the final word: consistency. At Windsor Castle later that evening, Prince William was approached by a reporter who asked whether he had spoken to his brother. His reply was brief, almost clinical. "We have moved forward." 3 words. Closure embedded in simplicity. And perhaps the most symbolic detail of all, Harry's final handwritten appeal, delivered January 13th, received no reply. Not rejection, not acknowledgement, just silence. Within palace culture, that absence spoke volumes. Back in Montecito, the covert pocket listing strategy faltered further. Cash buyers hesitated, wildfire risk ratings remained elevated, insurance premiums soared, financing pathways narrowed. 4 previously vetted investors withdrew, citing litigation exposure tied to potential Netflix disputes and nonprofit compliance reviews. A stunning house, one Beverly Hills realtor confided privately, but it carries narrative risk. Narrative risk. In elite property markets, that can be more expensive than square footage. By January 22nd, Riven Rock remained unsold. No escrow, no signed letters of intent. Just quiet viewings and non-committal follow-ups. Inside the guest suite, lights glowed faintly each night. The master wing remained dark. In London, Jubilee planning meetings proceeded uninterrupted. Princess Catherine reviewed Diana Memorial Fund expansion proposals for school initiatives. Princess Anne returned to Berlin for scheduled governance engagements. No internal briefings mentioned Montecito anymore. The Sussex name gradually disappeared from correspondence summaries. The refusal to comment is the comment one palace official summarized. Outside observers expected drama, fiery speeches, emotional reconciliations, tabloid warfare. Instead, what unfolded was structural disengagement. No shouting matches, no theatrical stripping of titles, just procedural distance. And that distance hurt more, because exile suggests conflict. Forgetting suggests irrelevance. For Prince William, blocking the rumored $36 million bailout wasn't simply financial prudence, it was philosophical positioning. Leadership defined by process, not sentiment. A future king signaling that the institution would not be reshaped by personal grievance or branding strategy. For King Charles, signing the 5-line letter from Sandringham represented something quieter but equally firm: clarity over compromise. Meanwhile, Montecito waited. Rain continued continued to fall intermittently over Santa Barbara County. The hedges remained trimmed, the iron gates still stood tall. But behind them, the atmosphere shifted from ambition to uncertainty. No new projects announced, no philanthropic relaunch teasers, no strategic media pivot, just waiting. One former palace aide reflected privately, the crown doesn't exile anyone, it simply stops carrying them. By the end of January 22nd, the institutional verdict was unmistakable. No duchy funds, no grace and favor extensions, no reinstated privileges, no emergency rescue. Titles still existed on paper, but paper cannot pay insurance premiums. Paper cannot satisfy mortgage clauses. Paper cannot reverse clawbacks. The $36 million ask had been more than a financial request. It had been a final test of loyalty, of precedent, of institutional resolve. The answer had come sharp and final. Request denied. And as Riven Rock remained unsold, lights dimmed, and doors stayed unanswered, the larger reality settled in like coastal fog. This was not a royal feud burning bright and loud. It was a slow, silent divorce from legacy itself. The monarchy had drawn its line. And this time, it did not blink. It did not blink. It did not blink. It did not blink. It did not blink.